the search for perfection. This was my earliest obsession as a Christian. The search for perfection. I know I have spoken about this before. You probably will remember me mentioning it. But I was looking for something that I didn't understand. And when you look for what you don't understand, you know the saying that if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Wherever you end up is right, because you don't know where you're going. So if you end up under a bush, then maybe you're okay there. Or if you end up on top of a mountain, maybe you're okay there, because you don't know where you're going. Any road you take will take you to a destination which may be where you really were going after all, were meant to go. So I say this because I know at the beginning, I know I wanted perfection. I wanted perfection because I wanted to do everything that I could possibly do to please God and to draw closer to God. I'm not saying that this search was useless. I'm not saying this. I wouldn't say that. There is no effort that we make to draw closer to God that can ever be wasted effort. No, I'm not saying this. But when you search without understanding, you waste time and you end up in many dead ends and dark alleys where you should not have gone after all. I think the Apostle Paul says he's not fighting like one who beats the air. He wants to run this race, and he runs it in an intelligent way, not like somebody who is beating the air. And what he's talking about is the skill of running. You know that people who run and their hands flail about wildly. Their hands don't have any direction. They are beating the air. They're actually slowing themselves down. To run with rhythm and a system and a pattern helps you to go faster and more efficiently. So I was like that, beating the air. But I was after perfection. In the 50 years that I've been a Christian, I've read a great deal on the subject of perfection. One of the things I know is that there are many people who say it is impossible. But I also know that there are many people who are still searching diligently, desperately, persistently for this goal of perfection. And so I wanted to share with me as we do a little examination of the topic, because I want us to get this right. Should we be seeking for perfection? And if we are seeking for perfection, what are we really seeking for? Is it something that we can ever achieve? And if so, what is the process? And if not, we want to understand. Maybe the majority of Christians will tell you that it's not possible in this life. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, first of all, I want to highlight the fact that there is a promise of perfection. All of us are familiar with the verse. If we look at Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 to 13, maybe I'll highlight something here. But it says, and he gave some apostles and some prophets and some evangelists and some pastors and teachers for the perfecting of the saints. There is the word. The Bible uses it. For the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come in the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man. The word is used twice, but it goes on to explain what it means when it says, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. It's very difficult to look at these verses, these verses 11 to 13. It's very difficult to look at this passage and not conclude that God has perfection in mind somewhere for his church, for his people, for his kingdom. It says twice that God has put gifts in the church for the perfecting of the saints, you and me individually, until the church comes up to a perfect man, and it expresses this perfection as being the stature of the fullness of Christ. Now, maybe somebody might refer to that as maturity, the fullness of Christ. But you can't deny that the Bible uses the word perfect. So if there's a Christian who believes in perfection, then I would have to say that you are in perfect harmony with what the Bible says. The challenge of perfection, I think I commented on this. Let me touch on it a little bit more. First of all, there is a challenge when we talk about perfection because there's confusion about what perfection means. And we will look at some of the concepts of perfection in just a moment. But there's confusion about this. So when you say, if you say you want to be perfect, are you speaking about the same thing that I mean when I say I want to be perfect? You know, we can use the same argument, but if we talk the same words, but if we are talking about two different things, then we are speaking in unknown tongues to one another. So we want to make sure that we have the same understanding when we undertake to discuss any topic. And I just want to say in passing that many times this is 90% of the problem when we have a disagreement. We're using the same words, but with different understanding. Every one of us should try to remember that. Many times our concepts are similar, but our words are causing a problem because they have different definitions. All right. There's confusion about perfection. There's also skepticism about perfection. And again, this skepticism means there is doubt, there are questions, there is a lack of conviction. Why? Maybe because of the same number one reason. Because we are talking about different things. Maybe. Number three, same thing, vague definitions. And number four, and this is one I want to just mention, focus on a little bit more. A lot of the efforts to become perfect are aimed at performance. All right, now, I'm going to say, even before I take another step further in this study, that this fourth point is the greatest obstruction to ever becoming perfect. It's the greatest obstruction to ever being at peace. If you think perfection consists of my effort, my struggle, my battering, my endeavor, if you think you will ever become perfect by this way, I will say right at the beginning of this study, you have set out on a pathway that may even lead you to the place where you become an unbeliever. Because I can tell you, this is a dead-end road. I mean, part of my reason for saying so is my own struggle that I went through in my past. But also, now that I come to understand the biblical way, it's very clear to me that this is a path that leads to futility and frustration. You know, a lot of the time, probably all the time when people try to become perfect by their behavior, they have an idea like this. Their idea goes something like this. All right? There are 10 commandments. I have stopped breaking the Sabbath. I've stopped committing fornication. I've stopped killing. I never did kill anybody. I've stopped stealing. Now I have to work on covetousness, and I have to work on having other gods before God. You set out with a list, and you try to whittle away at the list, and you think that when you get to the end of this list, you will have attained perfection. This is what the road to perfection looks like when you base it on performance, when you base it on behavior. And one day, I woke up to the realization that I am capable of 10,000 ways of behaving. I'm capable of 10,000 kinds of behavior. Not 10, 10,000. And if I'm going to become perfect by eliminating every wrong behavior one at a time, I'm on a road that will lead me. I will be dead of gray hairs before I'm even an old man. I recognize that that is a dead end road. It's a foolish road. By the time that's the road where you say, I took 2 steps forward, 5 steps backward. That's the journey you're on. You say, I've mastered not telling lies. So now I'm going to go on to not coveting. And by next week, you told 10 lies. We don't overcome sin. We don't become perfect in that way. That's not the pathway that the Bible outlines, but the concept of perfection by behavior leads us in that direction. I wanted to say that. That is one of the reasons why we have this confusion, why perfection is such a vague, nebulous thing, because we don't know what we are really looking for. Now, the concepts of perfection, and maybe we begin to zero in a little bit here now. Number one, perfection of behavior. When you talk about being perfect, does it mean that you become so perfect that you never ever do one thing that can possibly be wrong? Now, I want you to think about this, because what does it mean to do something wrong? You've heard me say, I listened to this tape many years ago where the brother who was presenting the message, he was into health reform. I was very much into health reform at that time as well. And he said, don't even lick your fingers between meals. And I accepted this. I accepted this concept of perfection. I remember when I was a young Christian, one of the first books I ever bought was The Ministry of Healing by Ellen White. And I read where Ellen White says, 2 meals a day are ideal. At this time, I was in my 20s. I was alive, vibrant, full of life, hungry like a horse. And I was into sport. I was playing football in the evenings, hungry as a horse, and I started eating 2 meals per day. The place where I used to work, they used to provide a lunch, and I used to collect my lunch and carry it home for my dog. And I started to find myself getting weak. I found myself full of gas because of the program I had gone on, which was totally unsuited for me at my stage in life, my place in life. But I didn't know. So I jumped into it with both feet. And of course, I started to have problems. But where do you go when you think of perfection according to the things you do? Don't even lick your finger between meals. What does it mean to be perfect? Does it mean that you never go to bed late? Does it mean that you never forget anything? It's a statement where Ellen White says it is a sin to forget. Just a little something that happened to me. I'm going to drop in a little testimony here that I shared on Wednesday night. I was actually in the children's program this morning and I shared it again. But as I mentioned, forgetting. Think about this. Look at what happened to me this week. Sabbath night, I was in a little discussion with Jen and Daniel and Dave, and the children were here and we were talking. And we were discussing athletics because we're all interested in athletics. And I was trying to remember, we tried to remember the name of a Dutch athlete, a girl who won a lot of medals. She's very gifted. The marathon, 10,000, 5,000, and we were trying to remember this name. I couldn't remember. And it made me think, man, these days I'm forgetting so many things. These days. In the morning I got up to pray, and it came to my mind again. Phew. Lord, what's the name of this person? And it was gone. My mind just hit a blank wall, and I could not remember the name of this. It's an unusual name. So of course, it's not like an English name or a Jamaican name that I can connect to things. So it's just a word, and I couldn't remember. And I thought to myself, man, as I grow older, I'm losing my memory. Now they told me, it's not that you're losing your memory, it's that you have so many things packed into your brain, your mind is finding a challenge, pulling out the proper file. Maybe that is it. I like to think that is it. So I don't think that my mind is going, but that I just have too much data. That sounds better. But as I was thinking like this, I thought, God will help you with anything. And I thought, don't be stupid. You're going to ask God to help you to remember the name of somebody who is absolutely irrelevant and of no importance. But just because I was talking to God, I said, Father, would you help me to remember the name? And look here, I didn't finish saying name. And the word smashed into my mind, clear as crystal. Her name is Sifan Hassan. And when the name came into my mind, Sifan Hassan, I thought, that doesn't sound right. And then I said, yeah, that's the name. And it was. And it's a name I'm not going to forget again. How can I ever forget it? And I realized that the Lord was saying something to me. You know what he was saying? You know what I learned from it? I mean, it's not that, I know God will sometimes just smile with us and do something like Peter walking on water for no reason. But I learned a lesson. And the lesson is a valuable one. And the lesson is this. Don't ever judge your abilities by your human capabilities. Don't ever limit yourself or measure yourself by the abilities you have as a man. So, do you need a good memory if God is with you? Do you need to be smart if God is with you? Do you need to be strong if God is with you? Somebody said something to me that I don't know if it's true, but it's an interesting idea. He said that he believes Samson was a little tiny man, maybe about my size. All the pictures of Samson like this gigantic, muscular guy. I don't know if it's true, but he was saying that he thinks Samson was a little guy my size, so that when Samson ripped a lion apart with his hands and when he tore down the temple of the Philistines, those were miracles. But if he was big and strong and muscular, it wouldn't have been so amazing. Maybe it was true. I don't know. I wouldn't teach that because I don't know. But the point came across clearly that God does not need our abilities. All that we need is to be with him, and everything is okay. I don't need to keep on remembering I'm getting a little weaker, I'm getting a little older. No. Nonsense. I have God. And with God with me, I'm the equal and greater. Far, it's unequal when you compare anybody else to me because I have God. So anyway, that's a little bit beside the point. But I kind of was looking for an excuse to share that experience because it was such a blessing to me. But the point I want to make is if you look for perfection according to performance, I sinned. I've sinned Saturday night when I couldn't remember the name. I sinned Sunday morning when I was praying because I still couldn't remember the name. Well, somebody might say, well, God help you to overcome the sin by reminding you. But you get the point I'm making. Perfection of behavior is a poor way of measuring perfection. What about perfection of surrender? Now, this is more realistic. This is something I like. Because if we are talking about perfect in our surrender, what we are talking about is the things that God brings to our attention, the things that we know to be wrong. Thirdly, what about perfection of nature? Will we ever be perfect in nature? And when we say nature, I mean in my body, in my spirit, in who I am, not what I do, but who I am. Will I ever be perfect? And fourthly, perfection of character. What does that mean? Well, somebody might say perfection of behavior is connected to perfection of character. Maybe, maybe not. They might even say it's connected to perfection of nature. As a matter of fact, we might say that all these four things are connected. But I think most people are looking at perfection of character, and I want to look at this I want to look at all of these four things to some extent and see what we can conclude at the end of our discussion today. Now, the first approach, which is very popular, I want to comment on, is the imitate Jesus approach. The imitate Jesus approach to perfection. Now, most of us are familiar with this kind of approach. I want to highlight it again. It is built on this premise. There are two questions that they like to ask, or two questions they like to focus on. The first idea is that we are just like Adam. We are just like Adam, but we are like Adam after he sinned. Or rather, I shouldn't say we. They're talking about Jesus. Jesus was just like Adam after he sinned. So he was just like us, and so the argument is, so we can live just like him. Jesus, this is what Jesus was. He was like Adam after Adam sinned, and they say he was like this in every respect. There is no difference between Jesus and us. And if this is true, if he was just like us in every respect, then the argument is, therefore we can be just like him. And of course, Jesus was perfect. And so it stands to reason that we can also be perfect just like Jesus. This is what I refer to as the imitate Jesus approach. It is that we operate in the way he operated because we are just like him. And so if he was perfect, we can be perfect by just copying his behavior. There's another argument that he was like Adam. Jesus was like Adam. He took the nature of Adam before Adam fell. Now, before Adam fell, Adam was perfect. And so they say that he was different from us. And so because he was different from us, we cannot be like him. We cannot live like him. These are the two groups and the two arguments. So of course, those who take the first position, they say we can be perfect like Jesus. Those who take the second position, they say we cannot be perfect like him. But in actual fact, in my opinion, both of these groups are wrong. Both of them are looking at the picture in the wrong way. But this is the most popular controversy you will see out there. And that's why I'm putting this before you. Of course, those who take number two position are usually people who believe in the Trinity. They believe Jesus came here as God. And if Jesus came here as God, of course he was perfect. And how could anybody be like him? So, as far as the concept of imitating Jesus goes, these are the arguments. Now, I think I need to hurry along because the time is going. Now, there's another approach that I want to put before us, which I want to refer to as the inheritance approach. And it is simply, we're born again into his life. We're born into the life of Jesus when we are born again. We become a part of him. We become joined to him. We become a part of him. We inherit the life he lived, the life he lived in the past. That is important. And we experience the life he lives. So we inherited, and consequently we experience. Now look at this picture, all right? I think most of us in this room, this is the concept that we believe in. We receive the life of Jesus. Number one, we become a part of the life of Jesus, okay? We are joined to him through the impartation of the Spirit. And the Spirit comes into to us, and the Spirit brings as an inheritance the life that Jesus lived. So did Jesus overcome sin? We have inherited that experience. did Jesus become united to God, then we experience this. Is Jesus living at the right hand of God? We are experiencing this. So everything that Jesus is, we are. And everything that Jesus has, we possess. This is the inheritance concept. And if you look at this concept, then the question of can we be perfect is not really so difficult. It's a question of what do we mean by this? Now, if you look at this list, I think you will agree that perfection, whatever the concept of perfection, it has to be something that is not impossible. It has to be something that is possible. If we are joined to Jesus, we become a part of him. We inherit the very life that he possesses. Then naturally, we can live as Jesus lived. But the problem is, I have never met anybody, including myself, who could say that he has lived a perfect life or he is living a perfect life. And somebody will say, well, if you say this, you are presumptuous. Nobody who is perfect will really say he's perfect, but I would correct you about that. I remember Jesus said, which of you convinces me of sin? Which of you can convict me of sin? And nobody could answer. I remember the Apostle Paul says, for I know nothing against myself. The King James Version translates it, for I know nothing by myself. But if you look at any other translation, what Paul is really saying, I know nothing against myself. Even though he says, but I'm not justified by this. He's making the point, I don't know of any sin in my life, but I'm not saying that this is my justification. Okay? So, I don't believe that it is wrong to say that I am living a life of victory. It can't be wrong to say I live a life where I overcome sin. If we are experiencing the life of Jesus, this is normal. This is the way it ought to be. However, I want to point out something, that we do possess something that makes a difference. And I believe this is why God understands, God sympathizes with our failures, even when we are Christians. And I'll highlight what I'm talking about. Now, Jesus, we are looking at Jesus. And we are looking at the way Jesus was. Because Jesus is the model, Jesus is the example we are looking at in trying to understand perfection. As far as genetics was concerned, Jesus was the same as us. Some of you have probably heard of Ron Wyatt. You've heard of Ron Wyatt. Ron Wyatt is the man who claims to have discovered Noah's Ark, the Red Sea crossing, Sodom and Gomorrah, the real Mount Sinai, and in at least 3 of those things, maybe all 4. And with Ron Wyatt, I believe that he probably did discover the true Mount Sinai. I very strongly believe this. That he probably did discover the Red Sea crossing. I strongly believe this. The evidence is very strong. Maybe Sodom and Gomorrah too. Possibly the true place where Noah's Ark rested. I'm not as strong on that, but I still am pretty much persuaded. But then he says that he found the Ark of the Covenant. He found it in a cave in Jerusalem underneath the place where Christ was crucified, according to him. 4 angels showed it to him, so he says. But here's what he says, which I absolutely reject. He says he saw blood on top of the ark. And the blood was not dried up. He claims that blood trickled down through a crack in the rock where Jesus was crucified. And it came down through the dirt and it dropped on top of the ark, the mercy seat that was underneath, in a cave underneath. Now, according to the book of Maccabees, Jeremiah hid the Ark of the Covenant in a cave. But nobody knows where that cave is. Ron Wyatt says he found the cave. Angels directed him to the cave. 4 angels took him in there, told him he couldn't take any pictures, showed it to him, told him not to touch it, and then he left, and that is it. I don't believe it. But here's the thing that he said. He says he took the blood and he got it tested at a lab in Israel. And when they tested the blood, they found that there were 23 chromosomes. Now, you know that human blood has 46 chromosomes, okay? You have 46, half of it from the father, half of it from the mother. Now, he says that the blood that he tested had 23 chromosomes. What he's saying is that Jesus was not physically a normal man. He thinks he's exalting Jesus and glorifying Jesus by making out that he was some kind of supernatural human being. But if this is true, Jesus was not truly a member of our race. We know that his birth was a miracle. We know that he was born of a virgin. And so we know he did not have a human father. But did God create a physically hybrid person? There are many elements of the story, otherwise why I don't believe also. He cannot tell you what the lab was, and there are no records of this. Spurious and questionable. But the point is, that alone would make me doubt the story. Because as far as humanity is concerned, Jesus was just the same as us. This is why he called himself over and over the Son of Man. That was the name he gave himself, the Son of Man, because he wanted to emphasize that we are the same. He is the same as we are. That's what it says in Hebrews 1. He's not ashamed to call us brethren because we are all one of the same. Jesus was not victorious because he had different flesh than we do. It would be easy to say Jesus had 23 chromosomes. We have 46. So Jesus never sinned because he was different physically. I will stop sinning when I have a different body. Maybe if you give me a body with 23 chromosomes, then I'll stop sinning. It's easy to think this way if we take that direction. His brain power was the same as our brain power. Now, that is something maybe we don't think about. But because Jesus was so smart, and because Jesus was so thoughtful and careful, if we don't give this careful thought, it's easy to believe that he was Superman with super brain. But if you consider all the elements of his life, he's walking with the disciples, they're on the road to Samaria, he sends them to the town to buy bread. What does he do? He sits down by the well to rest. Why? Because he's tired. They're in the boat traveling across the sea, and the disciples are working, and what is Jesus doing? He's sleeping because he's tired. He's a man like you and I are men and women. He is a human being with the capabilities of humanity. When you hear him giving the Pharisees a super smart answer, it's because his mind is educated by God. It's because he is controlled by the Spirit of God. It's not because he has a super brain. His physical structure is just like yours and mine. What about his spiritual nature? Well, remember, we are looking at Jesus. We are looking at Jesus, the remaining hindrance. In his humanity, Jesus was just like us. In his brain power, he was just the same. In his spiritual nature, he was the same if we are born again. Now, Jesus' spiritual nature is that he was the Son of God, but he was also filled with the Spirit of God. Now, we will never be the sons of God in the same way that Jesus is the Son of God. Never, for all eternity. We will never be begotten the way Jesus was begotten. We'll never be divine by nature. But in terms of having the Spirit or the nature of God in us, we are pretty much on the same level as Jesus when we are born again. We have the power and the ability in our spirits to be like him. The one remaining thing, the one thing that remains different is that our history is different. You can't get away from this. Nobody can deny this. Every one of us have a sinful history. Every single person in this room, even a baby 1 month old, has a sinful history. We have all tasted from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We all have personal experience in what it means to sin. And this creates a permanent hindrance in our lives. This is something Jesus never ever had. Now, this is something, there are people who say that Jesus, when people tell me that Jesus was just exactly like we are, I ask them the question, why didn't Jesus sin as a baby? They say babies can't sin. I say, did he get into a temper like other babies? Do you think when Jesus was a baby, he got into a temper and screamed and cried for food? And some of them say his mother trained him properly. I see Sister Doreen with a little baby in her hands. I'm not sure. That baby is maybe not yet 6 months old. Am I right, Sister Doreen? Put up your hand if I'm right. Right, that baby is not yet 6 months old. And it looks like a very well-behaved baby. But I'm going to tell you that if you live around that baby constantly, you will see evidences of the sinful nature of this baby. There's a little baby that lives next door, and I don't know, maybe that one is spoiled, but every morning I hear this baby screaming. And it's not that they're mistreating the baby, but the baby, there's something in the nature that is coming out. You don't have your way, you scream. And did Jesus ever behave like that? Did Jesus grow up with these inborn tendencies that these prenatal tendencies that quickly developed as soon as he was born, and he began to show these elements of irritation and impatience? Did he ever show this? And it's fantastic to believe that a child could have lived who, even as a baby, never showed this. But he didn't. Now, we understand it was because he was born with this divine nature, because he was the Son of God. But you and I were not like this. And if you were like me as a child, you had it with a vengeance. My middle name was Mischief. And as I grew older, I migrated from mischief to definite troublesome. And then I migrated from troublesome to wicked. All of this is in my memory. Things that were there without my input or without my deliberate choice. These are elements that Jesus himself never ever experienced. His history is different from my history. So even when I'm born again, brothers and sisters, even when I'm born again, this does not go away. So in this, Jesus is different. So if we are looking at Jesus as the standard of perfection, we have a problem. If we are looking to Jesus as the model, let us say Jesus is a prototype, we can look at these three things and think we are just like Jesus was. Even the people who say we are exactly like Jesus was exactly like us, even they must accept that in our sinful history, Jesus was different. That is something we live with that Jesus never had to live with. So if you use Jesus as the model, this alone tells you that there is something there that doesn't balance out. All right. Now the Bible lays out a pathway. God has laid out a pathway to explain how this perfection is to take place. Now the Bible promises perfection. We saw the verse there in Ephesians chapter 4. Until we come to the perfect man, the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. We are coming to something, but we have a hindrance, and that hindrance is the history of our past, the memories and the habit patterns we developed that have become embedded in our muscle, in our brains, in our reflex actions. These are a part of our experience. Now, I'm not telling you all of this as a way of excusing sin, but I'm trying to be realistic, to examine what we are looking at carefully so we know what we can come to grips with what we are dealing with. Now, in Leviticus 16 and verse 30, there's a verse in the Bible that I believe lays out the pathway. Why do I choose this verse? Because this verse speaks of an experience that takes place at the end of time. I'm not going to go back through that this morning, but all of us who are a part of this fellowship, we have been looking at the feast days, and we see that feast number 6 is the Day of Atonement, which is to take place in our day and in our age. Can't look at that this morning, but I know you all understand. Now it says, Leviticus 16 and verse 30, for on that day shall the priest make an atonement for you to cleanse you, that ye may be clean from all your sins before the Lord. Let me look at these elements individually, the specifics. First of all, on that day, this means that we are talking about a definite time. There's a time appointed. God has appointed a time when his people are to be clean from all their sins. Okay, so what am I saying? If you accept what I'm saying, I am saying that this kind of cleansing could not take place and cannot take place before a particular time. There is a time appointed. And I'm aware of the implications of this. People will say, what are you saying? Are you trying to tell people that it's not possible to be perfect today? Are you trying to tell people that they should not try to be perfect today? This morning, as I was talking to the Lord, those thoughts came to my mind. Many years ago, there was a brother who told me that the people who accepted my teaching, they had become careless and they were not concerned about living holy lives. A brother told me this. I don't know if it was true in his experience, but I put the challenge before everybody who is in this room. I wanted to think about it and ask yourself if that is true, because I don't know how people relate to the message of Christ, our righteousness. I know, as I was saying to the Lord this morning, there are some things in which I am not anymore as picky. Okay, for example, I no longer eat 2 meals a day. I no longer like if I'm licking my fingers between meals. I no longer am so obsessed with never forgetting. There are certain things that I used to think Sabbath keeping entailed that I no longer see it in that same kind of, there are some Sabbath keepers who will not light a fire on the Sabbath. They'll not warm up their food on the Sabbath, things like this. And I used to endeavor to be as strict as I possibly could be. I'm not as strict in some of those things these days. And some people might look at me and say that I've become more careless. And as I was talking to the Lord, I was saying, Lord, am I more careless or am I more free? Am I more free or am I more careless? Does freedom mean you become careless? Or does freedom mean you have better understanding? I was even thinking about children growing up. You find children growing up in strict homes where they are taught to be very diligent, to be very strict in observing every rule. And you have children who grew up otherwise, they are more relaxed. Instead of trying to be so strict on them, you try to teach them principles. How do those children end up? I'm not answering the question, I'm asking the question. How do they end up? I found in many cases that those who come up in a very strict environment, they either grew up becoming what I would call nominal Christians. They are Christians and they go through the motions, but they never have a loving, close, beautiful relationship with the Lord. Or else they leave Christianity as fast as they can. As soon as they go out on their own, they abandon Christianity. Those who are taught to be not so legalistic, but to think about their religion and to make decisions for themselves, they tend to become, in my experience, they become better Christians. They become people who seek a relationship with the Lord. They are not as legalistic and works-oriented, but they do have a commitment to the Lord, and they do seek to serve the Lord in a more faithful way. Now I understand. We don't want to be people who become libertines. Many years ago, I did a sermon entitled, "Are You Fit to Be Free?" And I try to point out that there are many people who accept freedom, but they don't understand freedom. Because true freedom means that you become the servants of Christ. Paul says, all things are lawful, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful. I am free to do anything I want. I am free in Christ. But I will not be brought under the power of any. Now that you become a Christian, you don't have to watch the sunset on Friday evening. If you bleed over a little, it's not a crime. Now that you're a Christian, you don't have to be so nitpicking about what you watch on TV. But I'll tell you, the discipline of making the time to be with the Lord, the discipline of saying, I'm going to guard this time because I value it, that will strengthen you, not because the rule says so, but because your heart says so. You see what I'm saying? If you are fit to be free, freedom means I am free, I am not compelled to, but love compels me to. Not the rule anymore, but my heart. If as Christians our freedom makes us break the good habits, we will begin to drift into carelessness. Maybe that is why this person says that people who accept the message, they grow careless. Maybe. Or maybe it was a misconception on his part. But I think about it and I realize that a lot of people, they're glad to be free because they never really wanted to be bound, because they didn't know Christ. But if you know Christ, freedom doesn't mean the liberty to do like the rest of the world does. It means the liberty to commit myself to God instead of to the ways of God. It's focused on the person instead of on the person's ways. And you will find that the same kind of behavior from a different motive. Anyway, I got a little bit off track. Let me see if I can finish the rest of this in another few minutes, 10 minutes maybe. On that day, so there's a definite time appointed by God when he will set us free. That's what he says. The priest, this means that it is not our work, it is not our endeavor to be perfect, it's the exclusive work of Christ. Shall make an atonement. What is an atonement? The word atonement may be broken down into the three components: at, one, meant. And that's the primary meaning. People often interpret it to mean reconciliation, but that's not really the true meaning. The priest will make an atonement. It's a work of joining man to God, a work of making man and God at one. To cleanse you. So in other words, what Jesus did at Calvary and what was done before, this is something different. It involves a work of cleansing. Cleansing from what? From all your sins, and this includes the remaining sin. And what is the remaining sin? What we saw is that there is still a relic of the memories and the habit patterns that we developed. The history of sin, that is the one remaining relic. So this work of the Day of Atonement, is the work of cleansing this remaining relic. That's what God is focusing on in this end time work. There's a time appointed. It wasn't at Calvary. It wasn't at Pentecost. It is the exclusive work of Christ. It is vanity and foolishness for anybody to try to do this yourself. This is something that is the work of Christ. And because it is the work of Christ, it is something that must wait upon the timing of Jesus Christ. So this perfection that we're talking about, brothers and sisters, is not something that you or I should worry ourselves about, even though we should understand what is happening. Now I'm going to run through these promises. There are so many promises that make us understand that this is God's will. I'm going to run through these quickly, about 4 more. This one in Isaiah 4 verses 1 and 2 is beautiful. It says, in that day 7 women shall take hold of one man, saying, we will eat our own bread. You know this prophecy. 7 women signifying the Christian church, 7 signifying completeness, women representing church. I'm satisfied with that explanation. They take hold of one man, and the one man is Jesus. And what do they say? We will eat our own bread. Bread represents the doctrine. We'll have our own doctrines. We'll wear our own apparel. Clothing represents righteousness. We'll have our own righteousness. Only let us be called by your name. The name of this one man is Christ, Christian. They want to be called Christians to take away their reproach. In that day shall the branch of the Lord be beautiful and glorious. In that day, when the churches come together, 7 women, and they are called by the name of Christian, but they have their own doctrines and they wear their own righteousness, God's branch, the true people of God, will be beautiful and glorious. God's promise. And the fruit of the earth shall be excellent and comely, excellent and beautiful for those who have escaped from Israel. The word escaped is a telling word. It suggests that these people will have, they will have been, as it were, captive, like people in Babylon. These are the ones who escape. These are the ones who get out at this time. Now, if you go to this chapter and read it through, it's a very strange chapter, Isaiah chapter 4, because Isaiah is an Old Testament prophet. But when you read of this and you try to think, what could it literally mean? You can't come up with a meaning. It has to be symbolic. 7 women. Do you think there will ever be a day when 7 women grab onto a man literally and say, look, we will provide our own food? That will be the day. And we will provide our own clothing. That will be the day. All we want is to have your name. No, that will never happen literally, not in this world. Never. So it has a spiritual meaning. And everything there, when you apply the symbolism of prophecy, it's very clear. We're talking about the end of time. And it says that God's people will be those who escape from Israel. Similar to what Daniel was pointing to this morning when he was talking about come out of Babylon. And it says, it shall come to pass that he that is left in Zion, the one who remains among God's people, he that remaineth in Jerusalem shall be called what? Holy. Something is to happen that God's people will be called holy at that time. Everyone that is written among who? Among the living. It's talking about the last Christians left alive. When the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion, and shall have purged the blood of Jerusalem from the midst thereof, by the spirit of judgment and by the spirit of burning. Let me pass it up for the moment. I'll just comment on that briefly a little later on. Again, in Malachi 3 verse 1, God says, behold, I will send my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me. And the Lord whom you seek shall suddenly come to his temple. It's talking about Jesus coming to his temple, or to his church, or to his kingdom. Even the messenger of the covenant whom you delight in, behold, he shall come, said the Lord of hosts. And look at what God says will happen at that time. But who may abide the day of his coming? And who shall stand when he appeareth? For he is like a refiner's fire, and he is like fuller's soap. And he shall sit as a refiner and a purifier of silver. And he shall purify the sons of Levi, and purge them as gold and silver, that they may offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness. So I'm looking at these statements because I want to highlight that the concept of perfection is there. But along with the perfection, there is the idea that it is the Lord who will do this work of perfection. It's not something that people endeavor to attain unto. If we want to be perfect, it is not going to be our work. That's the point I'm making. As the Bible says, who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? Not one. Even though we are already the children of God, even though we are already born again, that remaining element, brothers and sisters, who is able to deal with it? Can you take away your sinful past? Can you take away the memories out of your brain? Can you reverse the habit patterns that you developed? Even after 50 years, you can't do this. And yet here is the promise of the 144,000 with the Father's name, the Father's character in their foreheads. Here it says that they are virgins. In their mouth there is no guile, no deception, no trickery. For they are what? They are without fault. There you have it again. The Bible shows you a people who are perfect. If God says it is to be so, how can anybody be so daring and bold and barefaced as to say it is not possible? Surely they are not reading certain parts of the Bible. And so the Bible describes the final church in this way. Here are the elements. Number one, the final church or the final kingdom or the final people of God, the remnant. They are those who have escaped from Israel. Interesting. Interesting. They are Israel, but they are the remnant of Israel. They are the ones who have escaped out of what is called Israel. Secondly, they are written among the living. We're talking about those who do not die. These are the ones who come to this place. Thirdly, their filth has been washed away. Something has happened to cleanse them. Fourthly, they have been purged like gold and silver. Fifthly, they are united in their faith, till we all come in the unity of the faith, Paul said. Number 6, they display the fullness of Christ till we grow up into the fullness of the measure of the stature of Christ. Number 7, they have the Father's name or the Father's character in their foreheads. Number 8, they are not defiled with women, and that has to do with, similar to number 1. Not defiled with women, not defiled with religious institutions is my interpretation. I'm not saying women mean churches, I'm saying religious institutions. Number 8, there's no guile in their mouth, there's no deception, there's no hypocrisy, there's no pretentiousness. This one appeals to me very much, like every other one, but this one, because I don't like hypocrisy, and I don't like to be a hypocrite, and I'm uncomfortable when I'm dealing with hypocrisy. It's an important point because God puts it here. He says of these people, there's no guile in their mouths. Number 10, they are without fault. That's a capstone that covers everything. 10 points, we could find more, but I wanted to put these 10 because from the verses we looked at, these are the 10 things we noticed. These are the 10 characteristics of the remnant. God will have a people who are perfect. However you want to define perfection, God shows you this picture. Let no Christian deny that it will happen. But the thing to remember, it is a work of Christ. It is not something you and I can produce. That is what is important to remember. Now the process, how does God do this? He even tells us the process. And look at what he says. We saw it already. I'm just reminding us of the verse. Isaiah 4, verses 3 to 4. The Lord will wash away the filth by the spirit of judgment. The experience of the judgment that Daniel was speaking about this morning. The judgment of the church is an experience of purification. Isaiah also describes it here as the spirit of burning. Judgment and burning. This is the process by which Christ will purify the church. It's not going to be a bed of roses. But as the Lord reminds us over and over, whatever he takes us into, he will take us through. Malachi says, it will be like a refiner's fire. It will be like fuller's soap. And he will purge the sons of Levi like gold and silver. And there's a reason why God says, purge like gold and silver, because gold and silver is purified with fire. It's a very stressful process, but the end of it is pure gold. That's what God promises. This will be the process by which his people will be perfected. Revelation 7 verses 13 to 14. It says, one of the elders answered, saying unto me, what are these which are arrayed in white robes, and whence came they? And I said unto him, Sir, thou knowest. And he said unto me, these are they which came out of the great tribulation. That's the process, brothers and sisters. The fire, the fuller's soap, the spirit of judgment and the spirit of burning, this is the great tribulation. That is what finally brings us to the place where our robes are washed and made white. But notice it is in the blood of the Lamb. Jesus is doing something special for us, but he does it in a process of great difficulty. Maybe after hearing this, some of us will say, Lord, put me to sleep. I don't need to be perfect anymore. I prefer to pass up the process. Maybe God knows what is best for us. He knows who will be his representatives in that final demonstration. Our involvement, and the last verse I think I have here, Leviticus 16 verse 29, it shall be a statute forever unto you that in the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, the day of atonement, you shall afflict your souls and do no work at all. That's what God says is our part of the process. Afflict your soul and do no work. All right, and of course we understand this is not literal. I'll come back to this in just a moment because I'm almost done. So this is God's way of purifying his people. First of all, the spirit of judgment. That's a part of it. That's how we become perfect. The spirit of judgment, the spirit of burning, judgment and burning, purge like gold and silver. I guess I should highlight the word purged as well. Number 4, spiritual gifts. I didn't highlight this too much, but in Ephesians chapter 4, it says God gave gifts unto the church for the work of perfecting the church. What else? 5, through afflicting of souls. And the final thing I have here is by doing no work. All right, let me just focus on the last two. What does it mean to afflict your soul? You know that for a long time, I literally was fasting. I fasted a lot because I thought this was the work of the Day of Atonement. And after all, I thought we were in the Day of Atonement since 1844. That's what I thought. And so I was afflicting my soul. But look at what the rest of the verse says. You are to do no work. That's the part I couldn't fulfill because I had to work. I was doing a job. I had to work. And even after I gave up my job, I was still working. I did work around the yard. I was doing spiritual work. So that's when I recognized that no. I'm misunderstanding this. What is it that caused God's people to do no work and to afflict their souls? It is the experience of the great tribulation. It is the experience of the judgment, because God's people are put into a fire that is so great, so pervasive, so inescapable that they are afflicting their souls. God's people are praying night and day. God's people are seeking God like they have never done before. Why? Because their freedom, their lives, their security are under threat. That's why they do no work in two senses. I think it's going to be that they are going to drop out of the work system of this world, literally do no work. But secondly, I think it also means that the works of the flesh, everybody who is among that remnant will be a non-legalist, will be somebody who is no longer involved in the works of humanity, but in whom only the works of Jesus are manifested. That's what I think. And this is a process, brothers and sisters, by which God's people will finally be perfect. So, somebody will say, okay, David, you have put everybody to sleep. You have made everybody understand we can't be perfect, so just go to sleep. Look here. There is a human input. It says, Jesus says, this is not the work of the Day of Atonement. This is not the work of the time of perfection. This is the work of every Christian night and day forever. Abide in me. Are you going to wait until the time of the tribulation, the time of the testing to do this? This is the one work that Jesus has given you. Abide in me, believe in me, and abide in me. This is the work of God, that you believe in the one who he has sent. The branch cannot bear fruit of itself except it abide in the vine. No more can you except you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He that abideth in me and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. That's all. That's your business, brothers and sisters. And whether you live in the time of the apostles or you live at the end of time, your work doesn't change. Our work is to abide in Jesus. Look, if we abide in Jesus and you lose your memory and you can't remember the name of somebody, look, it's Jesus' business. Your business is to abide in him. If you want to be perfect and you don't know how to be perfect, do you think we can obtain perfection by looking for perfection? That's human fallacy. The only job we have is to abide in him. Jesus is a target. Jesus is a focus. Jesus is a goal. And Jesus is to be all in all. This is why it says, and the final verse I will read. While the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept. But at midnight there was a cry made, something happens. We have come to the time of the judgment and the burning and the testing and the purification. And somebody says, behold, the bridegroom is coming. Go you out to meet him. Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. Now everybody is awake. Now is the time when we are to think, okay, what extraordinary behavior are we to take now? Because the moment has arrived. And what is the consequence? What do we see happening? The foolish says, give us your oil, for our lamps are gone out. The ingredient that is most critical in that time, and in the slumbering time, and in the awakening time, and in any time at all, is the oil in the lamps. They fell asleep, but the oil was there. What does this mean? It means they were abiding in Jesus. It meant that the relationship of the Spirit was alive in them, and that is all that was necessary. When the moment came, brothers and sisters, they were ready because they were locked in with Jesus. The Christians knew had the lamps. They had the word of God, the lamp. Your word is a lamp unto my feet. They had the lamp. They were virgins. And somebody says the virgins mean they had the correct doctrines. Maybe. It means they are not connected to false systems. This might be talking about the people in the independent movement who know the truth, but they don't have this connection with Christ. That would be the most frightening thing of all. That would be the most frightening and the most tragic thing of all. That you know so much, you have stepped away from the churches, you have stepped away from the deception, and you still have not stepped into Christ. How terrible would that be? But this seems to be the situation with the foolish virgins. They're virgins and they have the lamps, but they don't have the oil. So what I want to say about perfection, brothers and sisters, is that perfection is a given. There's a time when we are going to have the Father's name in our foreheads. There's a time when God's people are to be excellent and comely, where they are without fault before the throne of God. You and I cannot make ourselves perfect. Our duty today and forever is the one job of the ages, to abide in Jesus. Yes, today we can aim to be perfect in surrender. Okay? I agree, this is something we should aim for. Whatever Jesus asked me to do, simply say, yes, Lord, because I'm abiding in him. That's what surrender means. That's what he means when he says, if a man hear my word, he keep my word, my Father and I will come and make our home with him. This is perfection in one sense. But that perfection of character is the work of God through Jesus Christ. And it will be through the spirit of judgment and the spirit of burning. It's the work of Jesus Christ, the work of the Day of Atonement. And I believe we're living in that time now. But in the meantime, let us remain bound to Jesus and never let him go. That's what I wanted to say today. I took a long time to say it, but I hope the message came across properly.